Well, hello everyone. Thank you for spending either your afternoon or your evening just to kind of go over things. I won't spend a lot of time talking about myself because that's pretty much what the whole presentation is, and about my successes as well as my failures as I go and continue this path of medicine. Again, for those, my name is Dr. Nakyda Dean. I'm at Rush University Medical Center, which is one of the academic centers that's located in the medical district of Chicago. In that medical district, we have our county hospital system, or one of our VA hospital system, and another academic center called University of Illinois. And I am here on the behalf of NMF. Again, just wanted to share some information on the National Medical Fellowship. Again, as Adon kind of mentioned, I am the chair of the Young Leadership Council, and NMF was created to provide scholarship and support for underrepresented minorities and students in medicine and health professions, with the goal to help increase the number of the underrepresented minorities in medicine, as also to provide support through scholarship, awards, service learning programs, and also to help address the health disparities by increasing underrepresented minorities in medicine. Evidence have shown that minorities, when they enter the field of medicine, they tend to go back to the communities that they lived, and so in a lot of these communities tend to be underserved areas. And so we know that if we increase the number of underrepresented minorities, then we can help tackle some of those health disparities, because they'll be going back to the communities that have these disparities. And so again, my role is as the chair of the Young Leadership Council, and also I am alumni of the program, so I have received support through the organization through scholarships and service learning opportunities through medical school as well as during my residency. Also, you all probably learned about the organization through Me Mentor, which is here to kind of help with innovative and inclusive mentoring opportunities to inspire the next generation of health leaders in underserved communities. So a lot of times when we learn about the medical journey of different professionals, a lot of times the CV is what we end up learning about. While a CV can show and highlight a lot of one's success, a lot of times you don't get the whole narrative of the person. And so unlike when I'm applying for a job and mostly what they have is my CV, this presentation will also highlight on a lot of the struggles that I faced throughout this process, and the failures that don't ever make it to my CV, and yet, however, I was still able to navigate through the path of medicine. And so I wanted to become a doctor at a young age. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when I wanted to become a doctor, and it's hard to even understand why I even wanted to become a doctor in the first place, because as a young child, I never went to the doctor. There wasn't doctors in my community, and so I wasn't really exposed to that profession, you know, indirectly or directly. However, something bigger than myself, I instinctively understood that this is what I was meant to do. You know, I saw my mother physically helping people with wounds and things like that, and so that was interesting. But I never really had any hands-on exposure to the field of medicine. However, despite that limitation, from a very young age, like kindergarten, first or second grade, I knew I wanted to go in medicine. I later learned that the science, I was really interested in it, and that medicine, I had those specialties. And then I wanted to help people. But then as I got a little bit older, but it didn't take long for me to realize that seeing the lack of doctors in my community was one of the primary factors that said this is something that I should do, because I can be one of those people that can help out my community. And in this picture, I'm the like young bushy-eyed one in the middle with my Sonic t-shirt on, and that was back in the day when Sonic ruled everything. And then, however, during the process, while my interest to go into medicine was, you know, really juvenile in the sense of I just wanted to help people. You quickly learn that you can help people in many factors and many aspects. And so why was medicine the thing that I should do? Although I kind of recognized in the process, I didn't know the terminology of the things that I saw. And when I recognized that there were lack of doctors in my community to help my community or were represented in my community, I later learned that these things were called health disparities and underserved medicine. And so providing health equity, as I became more sophisticated in my journey to medicine, have been things I have really wanted to address as I continue my path in medicine. In my early education, so as mentioned previously, I am from Chicago, Illinois. Grew up in a very underserved area. This is underserved in medicine. This is underserved in economic resources and different things of that nature. Went to several neighborhood grammar schools and then eventually was able to go to a very good high school called Lane Tech. While I knew I wanted to be a doctor at the young age, I didn't know a lot of what I was supposed to do to become a doctor. I just felt that I needed to do well in sciences, I need to do well in math, I need to find an advisor, and I need to be a good person, because how can you try to help other people if you're not an overall good person yourself? My early inspiration would definitely be one of my grammar school teachers. So in this photo is Miss Stewart, who I had in middle school in the 7th and 8th grade 7th and 8th grade. And despite how old I am now, she is definitely someone that I'm constantly reminded of as I kind of continue to persevere through my different goals that I'm trying to obtain. And one of the things I kind of remember in my 7th grade classroom was one time, this is just like a paraphrase of something that she said. One time she told the class that life isn't about you. Your goal in life is to serve others and inspire future generation. In other words, her thoughts were that you should speak your truth and tell your story, because you never know how your successes as well as your failures can help inspire, encourage, and how encourage others, and how people may learn from those things. So a lot of things that we do in life, it shouldn't be about us. It should be, how can this help someone else, and how can this help the next generation? And it was interesting, even at, you know, the 7th grade, to hear something like that, because I already felt like I was on a path to pursue something that was bigger than myself. And then hearing, you know, my teacher give affirmations about this made it seem like, okay, I'm on the right track of what I'm supposed to do. I just don't know exactly how to do it. In addition, she will also remind us that, you know, you don't have to be the smartest person. You just have to work hard. And I felt like that described me perfectly. I was never the smartest person, but you wasn't going to outwork me, because I always try to put my biggest foot forward. And so again, growing up from Chicago, to really truly understand my story, you have to understand my circumstances. And so this is the city of Chicago, and the city of Chicago is very segregated. If you look on the right side of the screen, this shows Chicago as it comes to race demographics, in the sense of the very, like, pink is where you have mostly Caucasians, the blue is where you have predominantly Black, the little green right here, which is Chinatown, is where you have predominantly Asians, and then the orange is where you have predominantly Hispanic, and then the gray is like others. And so I am from this area right here called Garfield, which, you know, correlates to predominantly African Americans. And one thing about Chicago, with it being very segregated by race and also socioeconomic structure, my world growing up was very limited to like this area. While I'm not that old, I grew up in a time where people did not have access to the internet at their fingertips. You know, most people did not even have access to internet on their computer. And also, this also narrowed our surroundings. And so I grew up in Garfield Park, and I may have went to Austin, I may have went to Humboldt Park, but I really didn't leave this west side of the area. And one thing about why I find Miss Stewart to be such an instrumental part of my professional development. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have gotten out the West Side, because she exposed me to schools that were on the North Side. There was areas like I never knew of, which was Lane Tech, which we'll talk about shortly. And so my world was just so very narrow just because of where I grew up from, and then also my resources that was available to me at that time. So I end up going to Lane Tech High School, which is a Magnum high school on the north side of Chicago. It's one of the oldest high schools in Chicago, and it's one of the top schools in Chicago. When I was attending that school, it was like the number 2 in the city, and most recently in 2018, it was ranked number 3. So how did this girl who grew up in a very underserved area on the west side of Chicago have the opportunity to get to Lane Tech? One of the things that's interesting about our school system is, while you have the opportunity to test into any school on a high school level, when it comes to grade school, you have to go to your nearby schools. And I grew up in an area where our nearby schools were not well resourced. But despite that, I've always had mentors, kind of like Ms. Stewart, that helped mold me and challenge me to try to get the best education I could in the limited area that I was. And with that knowledge, I was able to test into a really good high school after I got out of the 8th grade. And at Lane Tech, I felt like I received a very great education, took competitive courses. However, despite that, my understanding of how competitive things could be was still limited. Like, I knew about honors classes, but I knew nothing about AP. And if I knew about that, maybe I would have like aimed for that or tried to get those things. But that's just how much I didn't know coming from a very low resource grammar school education. I was exposed to new things, made new friends, and understood the importance of diversity. One of the other things, despite being a very intellectual high school, Lane Tech is known to be one of the most diverse high schools in the Chicago area. And then this was a lot of times my first exposure to different cultures, to different type of people. Because remember, going back to the previous slide, I grew up in a predominantly African-American neighborhood. During the process, I lacked a mentor. I had limited exposure to medicine, limited understanding of the process of medicine, and had little to no network. I had a dream of what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how I could do it, when it would be possible to get to the right people to get to it. So it's still, a dream and an idea, and not really that tangible because I don't really understand the process. Again, as I mentioned, back in the day, most households didn't have computers or internet, but I did get a computer during high school, but I didn't have internet. So back when they used to send little discs to give you like dial-up internet, I just used to take the disc so I can have like free internet for a short period of time. And I will always do searches of how do I become a doctor, because I didn't understand the process, and I knew that I needed to figure out the process in order for this to be successful. So I spent a lot of my free time doing searches on this, and back in that time, the searches took forever because dial-up internet was so slow. And as mentioned, the most vital thing to have is a mentor to help guide you through the process, to help mentor you, to help expose you to different opportunities that can get you along your way. But when you're someone from the city of Chicago and you're from a family that doesn't have any doctors, you're from a community that don't have any doctors, having a mentor wasn't part of my future at that time. And so trying to navigate this whole process of the medical journey was a little challenging. A lot of it ended up me trying to figure out, what do I need to do next? I didn't have a blueprint of what needs to be done. I didn't have someone to hold my hand and explain this process to me. And so a lot of this was me trying to do research in encyclopedias and online and talk to people to figure things out. However, while I may not have had a mentor in medicine, I did have special teachers like Ms. Stewart, and I also had my family. So in general, I had my church, I had teachers that were inspirational and would help guide me along the way. And I also had my community, which was Garfield Park, to kind of help support me as I try to navigate through this process. And so I remember, like it was yesterday, some of those searches that I made to try to figure out how to be a doctor. And I remember seeing paths like this where you need to go to undergrad, then do medical school, then you go to residency, and then you do fellowship. I was like, okay, that sounds straight enough. But lo and behold, you don't really know all of the details that takes into place through each one of those stages. And so, you know, the end of high school, I'm getting to a point where I need to go to college because I know I got to get to college to become a doctor. But guess what? There's nobody in my family who went to higher education. So I don't even have that as a resource to help me even navigate. How do I even pick a good college to go to? So again, just like I had that innate feeling of why I wanted to become a doctor, a lot of me picking a school was a feeling. You know, I went to college fairs to try to learn more about different institutions and different things like that. But it was really that gut feeling that kind of told me where I needed to go. One of the things I forgot to mention about with Lane Tech is one of the largest high school. It had a population of about 5,000 students that attend. Very large and very intimidating to a shy person like me at that time. However, I learned a ton. But one of the things from that experience I realized is that I wanted a more intimate scenery when it came to colleges. And so going to a small liberal arts college was something that I realized is that I wanted. And so through that, going to the college fair, I learned about one place called Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa, which is something a lot of people don't know about, and I didn't know about it either, despite it only being 4 hours away from Chicago. But it's a small liberal arts college that at the time when I was attending there had about 1,200 students. So my high school was like 4 times bigger than this place when it came to population. And taking a city girl from Chicago to the cornfield, Iowa, definitely is a culture change. But it was just the experience that I needed for my professional development as well as for my personal development. And so, but I still knew that I wanted to go to medical school. So I was trying to figure out, how do I prepare for medical school in college? Like, I kind of knew what science prerequisites I needed to do. I was very good at chemistry and very fond of chemistry in high school. So I figured, okay, this is what I'm going to do in college. I've been told that, oh, you should do Latin for language because it'll help you with medical terminology. And I knew I had to take a test to get into medical school, but I didn't know a lot about this test. Things that I learned along the way that I didn't need to have a specific major requirement for medical school. However, I end up going with the sciences because I love the sciences at baseline. I could have done anything as long as I took the prerequisites to get into medical school. I really didn't know that I needed the importance that research and statistical classes would be to someone in the medical field. And I also, while my thought of a doctor was always the clinical aspect of medicine, I didn't realize how many non-clinical areas of medicine that someone can pursue after medical school. And so those are things that I was learning during the process and that I am continuing to learn as a resident. And I also did, as mentioned previously, I knew I had to take the MCAT, but I didn't know how I needed to prepare for it, and I didn't know like when I actually took it. But in college, you know, I made sure to get involved in a lot of different organizations. Some of them focus on health professions. The health professions organization tend to be very helpful to help people get into medical school. But this organization happened like my last year of college. So there was a lot of things that I was trying to still figure out on my own, and also with the help of an advisor. I also was got involved in the Black Awareness Culture organization. I also helped create a STEP team because, again, I'm used to Black culture because I am an African American woman, but I went to the middle of nowhere, Iowa, at a predominantly white institution. So things that I were passionate about and that I wanted to see represented on my campus, if it wasn't there, then I helped create and make those opportunities at the institution. Got very involved in international work, and in those organizations, I worked my butt off in our cafeteria / catering department. And so where I spent a lot of my time to help fund my education, but then also because it was a liberal arts college, I also got involved in things that I'll never do. In one of the Latin classes that I had to take, we actually put on the play, and I would never thought that I'll be acting and yet acting while speaking Latin. And so that was a cool experience as well. And so while participating in these different activities, things that I innately felt passionate about, all of these things was helping build in my application to help me get into medical school. My story is my story. And so I knew all of the things that, that has brought me to that point, and I'll be able to deliver that in a personal statement that will hopefully touch those that read it. I was doing well in my courses. And then, but again, I did recognize that despite me going to a really good high school, that I still felt like I was behind the bar when I got to college. And that is a typical thing that minorities or people from lower socioeconomic areas feel, because there is no equity. And so if you're growing up and if you're going to a low resource school, yeah, you may be doing well in that setting, but you are probably not exposed to the same type of material that someone who has the ability to pay for, a private education, or that just goes to a school in a better area that just have more resources. And so again, while I felt like I was doing well, I probably could do better, but I also had to recognize that there was some limitation just because my starting point was not the starting points of my peers. I also was trying to get exposed to medicine because that's important, because you want to know what you're trying to set, where you're getting yourself into committing to becoming a doctor. However, one of my limitations was I went to this school in this very remote area of Iowa, and I didn't have transportation. So getting to different hospitals and things like that to have that exposure, I didn't have that going into college and during college, just because I didn't have the availability to travel to those experiences. But I was involved in organizations, and so I had leadership skills. I am a big component of always giving back to those behind you. So I had a lot of volunteering experiences. I worked a lot to fund my education and to help support my younger sister during college. And so I definitely had work experience and work ethic. Research was lacking, mainly because I didn't know that that was something I should be trying to do, and that's something I should be trying to obtain. My MCAT, I knew was something that I needed to do, but I still didn't understand what I needed to do. So that component I didn't work on until later on, which I'll explain. And then I knew that, my other interests is outside of medicine should be attracted to others, because I was really interested in dance, step, and so that could always be an icebreaker when speaking to other people. But then during the end of my third year of undergrad to beginning of fourth year, I had this moment of realization, and it hit me like a bus. Like, I am not ready for medical school. Something in my gut is like, there is something else that I need to do. But I didn't know what it was that I needed to do. Everything that I knew about getting through my medical journey was, you do undergrad, then you do medical school, then you do residency, then you do a fellowship if you're interested in a specialty, and then you're a full board certified doctor. So now I'm like in panic mode, because I'm thinking like, okay, if I'm not ready to go to medical school now, how is this going to be possible? And that moment of realization came when I was having a conversation with one of my professors. Now, I mentioned previously that I tend to get decent, good grades, but there was a course that I was taking, organic chemistry. It makes everyone filled with anxiety, but I just wasn't understanding why I wasn't grasping the material. I'm thinking like, oh, I did good in, general chemistry. I did good in biology. I did good in this. And then one time I'm like asking the professor for his feedback, and he was like asking me questions about concepts. And I looked at him very confused. And I'm like, I don't understand the question that you're asking me, sir. So pretty much what the realization came that while I had learned these things and I did well on tests about these topics, when it came to be able to retain the information, I didn't do that. And that was mainly because I didn't know that I wasn't studying effective. I didn't realize that I didn't master the concept, so that once I left that subject, I can still regurgitate that information or still be able to spit concepts about that information. Somehow in my third year of college, I'm just learning that however I thought I was learning and doing well did not work. And you can imagine how anxious I felt and how in shock I'm like, how could I have been doing this wrong pretty much my whole life? And so then I was like, well, if I'm not ready for medical school, then what do I do? One of the things that the professor nicely suggested, you can consider other careers. In my mind, I've always thought about being a doctor. Maybe at little spurts of time, I thought about being like an inventor. I was really fascinated with those things when I was in grammar school and learning about different inventors and their inventions and things like that. But and maybe social work, but I never really considered other things because I just knew this is what I was supposed to do. But I did end up taking the advice. I was like, it can't hurt to explore those things. And so I went to the careers department just to learn about other things, that what could I do with the major that I've been pursuing. But in that process, I realized that those things, I didn't have that innate gut feeling like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So despite, the professor trying to give me good advice, I had to decline it. Like, no, I'm meant to be a doctor. I may not be the doctor how the typical person becomes a doctor, but I realize I'm still have the ability, I can still be a doctor. I just don't know how. But I was determined to figure it out. So things that I've recognized in that moment of realization is that the foundation of my knowledge, I needed to tweak. I needed to improve it. I needed to revisit concepts and figure out why I didn't quite understand, why I was having hard times with more advanced topics, because I needed to fix my understanding of my foundation. I needed to increase my exposure to medicine. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but yeah, I didn't really have that many opportunities that I was face to face with real doctors and seeing, what they do on a day-to-day basis. I need to learn about this MCAT test that I've keep hearing about that I need to take to get into medical school. And I need to do research. Depending on where I want to go, that's more or less important, but that's definitely something that can make me more competitive in the application process. And then I needed to graduate and figure out what my next steps were. And so this is a picture of my advisor, Professor T, who really helped me figure out what was the next steps that I needed to do. During one of the conversations that we had, and I expressed my, concerns of all these different things, I was like, I don't know what I need to do, but I know these is what I need to work on. What opportunity is it for me to work on these different things? And that's when he brought to my attention these post-baccalaureate programs, which that term I never heard of prior to, a conversation I'm having with him during the beginning of my fourth year in college. And so this is when I, realized my ability to become a doctor is actually possible. I've only learned about this one linear path to become a doctor. And in this conversation, in this moment with Professor T, I started to learn of the different avenues that people take to become a doctor. And now becoming a doctor felt more tangible to me. And it felt like something that I could possibly obtain. And so previously, when I was learning about the path to medicine, I only saw undergrad and going to medical school. But after learning about post-bac programs, I realized a post-bac program can be my stepping stone to help me get into medical school. And so I became more optimistic of my abilities to be able to pursue it. And there's different type of post-bac programs, and trying to determine which one is the best for you. You have to wonder, are you a competitive student? And you have to be honest with yourself. And I felt like my GPA made me a competitive person, but at that moment, despite the number GPA made me competitive, I innately realized I had my foundation of knowledge was inadequate, and I can't go into medical school where they're like forcing a lot of information at me at one time and have a weak foundation. So I wasn't impressed with my GPA. I just knew I just want to learn. I first need to learn how I learn best, and I need to revisit material so I understand that foundation, and that when I'm seeing more advanced topics, it won't trip me up. Again, as mentioned, the other ones, I wanted to increase my exposure to medicine, work on my MCAT, and do research. And so with the type of post-bac programs, you have master programs, and so you can get some master degree in some advanced topic. A lot of them work in science, but to me, I felt like if I'm already struggling with sciences, advanced sciences on a 300 level, doing that for a master is not going to fix my underlying problem, which is listed on the right side of the slide, or a graduate project. So I decided to do like the undergraduate type of post-bac program. You don't get a fancy new title behind your name. You just get a certificate of completion. But the program, I felt like whatever program that fit this needs was going to address the things that I realized were inadequate in my resume and that I needed to work on, and to help me get into professional school. And I end up graduating in 2008. And then this picture is very touching for me, because again, I'm the first in my family, is not only my immediate but my extended family, to graduate from college. And in that same year, I have two of my first cousins, one graduating from 8th grade and another cousin graduating from high school, and just really perpetuating that idea that, you know, we're all in this together. And so graduating that year with my family as well was definitely something that was touching. But then, as mentioned, I learned about, you know, post-bac program, and I came across the Medical Dental Education Preparatory Program, MedPrep, at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois School of Medicine, and realized this was the program that I needed. It was a certificate program, but it addressed all the things that I've realized were deficiencies that I wanted to work on. I had the ability to review topics from beginner courses to help me figure out what I was missing, so that I can learn for concepts and not just for grades. It also had the opportunities for me to do shadowing experience, so that I can have the opportunity to shadow doctors. It also gave me the opportunity to do research. And so it was definitely the program that, when I looked at my deficiency, it was the program that I felt like that was going to help me make myself a better candidate when applying to medical school. And so, as listed below, MedPrep was established in 1972 and has helped over 1,000 students from educational, economically disadvantaged backgrounds get into health professional programs. And so, you know, after learning about post-bac programs in general, and then particularly MedPrep, I realized MedPrep was that stepping stone that was going to get me from my undergraduate education and tie me over and get me into medical school. And then when I got into the program, I felt like I did really well. Like, I knew I came in with a plan. I recognized what things that I didn't understand, and I came in fired up and ready to work. Technically, that has been me my whole life, but I wasn't as aware of what I was doing and how things were working. But now, in this point in life, not only am I a hard worker, but I'm more efficient. I recognize where my deficiencies are. I recognize what things I need to work on. And so not only am I working harder, I'm also working more smarter. And so now, you know, this was the first time, you know, as I'm going through the MedPrep program, that I feel like becoming a doctor is actually tangible. Prior to that, becoming a doctor was this idea. It was this dream. It was this thing that I was striving for. But I didn't have a mentor to help shape me. I didn't have a mentor to help expose me to the field. So it felt kind of fake. But during my time at MedPrep, it actually became something tangible. That I was like, you know what? I'm doing I'm like preparing myself for medical school. I recognize that these are the concrete things that I need to do, and I know that these are the things that's going to help me get into it. And so becoming a doctor actually seemed possible. And not only do I can see myself as a medical student, I can see myself graduating medical school, and I can see myself being a doctor now, because now I have a tangible way of getting through the process. And that was the first time, 20 years prior, that I felt like that, despite me aiming to do this for a very long time. And so applying to medical school, I felt very confident. Those things that I listed as important aspect of your application, now I felt like I have strong numbers, strong experiences, strong recommendations to fulfill all of those things. And my story, my personal story, is only getting better, because I am a reflective person, and I'm realizing what I'm learning about me and my passion for medicine throughout all of this, and it's only making it my passion to pursue the field even more. So now, it's time to apply, and I'm feeling really confident about the process. However, money becomes a barrier, because to apply for medical school, you have to have money. And when you don't have money, guess what? You can't apply to medical school. So I was very devastated, because now I'm finally feel like I'm at the door, but I can't go through the door because I don't have access, because I don't have the monetary abilities to pay for this process. And medicine can feel like a profession for the elite, because you have to make money to get through the process. And when you're from a poor neighborhood like mine, you don't even have money to play the game, yet alone go through the process. And so don't mind these numbers, because I definitely wasn't applying for medical school during these years, but look at times that you're supposed to submit your application and interview. So people start working on their application during this time. They're submitting secondaries during this time. They're interviewing at this time. I didn't have money to submit my application. So I end up eventually, because I had been on the wait list for government assisted housing. And so this would reduce my rent to little to nothing. But I had been on the wait list for 1.5 years. So I finally get into one of the government housing around this time, which now means the money that I was using to pay rent, I can use for other things. So guess what? I did not apply for or submit my application into medical school until this time, like around here. Maybe it was more like October. If you look at this timeline, you already can tell I'm out the game. People have started doing their application here and submitting their application here. And now they're working on secondary application. I am only submitting my application at this time. So my odds of getting into medical school seem very slim. And it was very disappointing, because, for the longest, I felt like I wasn't able to get to this point because I didn't know how to. I didn't have the mentors to get me here. But now I feel like I'm at the door, but now the only reason I can't go through because I'm too poor to pay for the process, that is very devastating. And so I felt defeated, because I did well on the MCAT. I did well in my post-bac program, had a 4.0 GPA. I felt like I got those exposures to medicine, but yet I'm feeling defeated because of monetary abilities. And after doing all of that strategizing to improve my application seems like it may not make it, because I can't pay for other people to see it. But then the summer before I was applying, I did get to participate in the summer enrichment program. And with the summer enrichment program at Loyola, you get exposure to medicine, and you're able to participate in pretty much their medical school curriculum. And I met Dean Jones at that process. He also knew about the MCAT program, and he usually go there on a yearly basis to learn about, to see different students, because he felt like if people were trying to still pursue medicine after going to a post-bac program, it showed their dedication and their determination. And so when he came down to the place to kind of see, he was like, Nakyda, where's your application? I was like, I submitted it like last week because I didn't have any money. And he was devastated because he was like, he knew how hard I worked. And yet the only reason I was submitting my application late is because I couldn't pay for it. And so he was devastated, but he was like, you know what? He was like, don't worry about it, Dean. We're going to take care of it. Later that day or the following day, I received an interview invite from Loyola. And it was because of the conversation that I had with the deans of admission. And he knew me personally through my interaction at the summer program, as well as when he came for recruitment for the previous year. And he saw how much I have grown, and he did not want lack of resource to be the right reason why I wasn't becoming a doctor. And then I ended up doing the second look there, and I ended up matriculating because that showed that he had a lot of investment in me. And also, despite me submitting my application extremely late, Loyola wasn't the only place that I interviewed. I was lucky enough to be able to, and blessed enough to interview at a lot of different places and some of the top medical schools of my choice. But the personal connection that I had with the deans of admission at Loyola ended up causing me to matriculate there. And at Loyola, I met some of my old friends, so they also did the MCAT program. I met new friends, and I also had my first exposure to global health missions. I battled this crazy curriculum we call medicine. I, took these classes and learned about anatomy and struggled through pathophysiology. But overall, despite the volume of information that was coming to me, I was prepared because I knew how to do things quickly because of the curriculum I had at Cornell. I learned how I learned during my time at Med Prep. And so while everyone is going to struggle with medicine, I felt like it wasn't because I was deficient. It was just because it's hard. But I felt like I was doing well. Went through my clerkship years and, did well on my rotation. And this was my actual first time of being exposed to medicine and the different specialties. And so to me, this was like a different thing that I've never imagined, as you see your dream are coming into realization. However, sometimes we run into our roadblocks, and for me, sometimes it can be step one, and that tends to be a roadblock for a lot of people, but I end up doing well on that. The unexpected roadblock was this thing, step 2 CK, which was crazy because step 2 is so much easier than step 1, but somehow that was not for me. The first time I was in the middle of my 4th year in medical school, and I was applying for residency, and I found out I had failed step 2 CK. I have never failed anything in my life. Sometimes I may not have performed as well as I wanted to, but to flat out fail, that was unheard of, even from someone from my background. It was crazy to just flat out fail something, and so that was very shocking for me. And so, despite that, I had this plan B. I knew I was going to have a hard time matching because I wouldn't have enough time to take the test and have a passing score before it's time to match it to a residency. But I did find a plan B, and I found the prelim program. But eventually I did need to take step 2 again to have a passing score. Retook it again and failed step 2 again. So now I'm like, so I was devastated at first, but now I'm a little comical because I'm like, how in the world did I fail this test twice? And because I failed the test again, I had to withdraw from my prelim residency. So while I'll be graduating hopefully soon, I would not be going on to the next step. And the reason why this thing was comical, I failed the test twice by 1 point. I had to do a lot of reflecting to figure out like what was really going on. I think there was some higher power thing that was going on to eventually get me to where I needed to be. But it was crazy to realize this is the first time I failed something, and then I failed it by 1 point, and I retake it and I failed it by 1 point again. Crazy, but at the end of the day, something happened that needed to happen to get me to where I am in my understanding. So I'm trying to figure out what do I need to do, because now I'm too invested in this process and there's no other possibility for me to be than a doctor. I just don't know what needs to happen, but it's going to happen because I have invested too much time, too much money, and too much effort, and I'm not doing anything else. And then this is when I came up with this quote, is that you can't be discouraged by your shortcomings, your obstacles, and your past failures. Passion is made in the valleys, not the mountains. The meaning of this quote is that sometimes the obstacles that you face is there for you to truly understand your purpose. Sometimes when things go easy for you, you don't have to think, why do I want to do this? Why am I doing this? What is my purpose? But when something slaps you in the face, like failing a test, and you have to pick yourself back up and realize, in order for me to move on, I have to overcome this hurdle, you really get to figure out what you're passionate about, because it's easy to turn away. But to get back up and keep persevering through that substance, you realize what your passion is. And so that's why I feel like passion is made in the valleys. And so when I was in those low moments, I realized what aspect of medicine I felt that I will be bringing. And there's no way that any test or any person is going to stop me from being able to bring that aspect to medicine. So you always have to have a backup plan. So even though I knew I was going to be applying and still going to be trying to pursue this medical journey, I wasn't stupid. I realized I had red flags on my application that could be a turnoff for some people. But in order for me to be successful, I have to have a backup plan for my backup plan. So I reapplied the following year. I took step 2, I ended up passing it. I ended up applying to OBGYN positions, surgery, in that, because that's what I really wanted to do, OBGYN. My backup plan was surgery prelims. My backup plan was family medicine, because I was interested in women's health, and I felt like that can be another way for me to pursue women's health. And then my backup plan was to apply to transitional or translational prelim positions. So I applied to over 100 residency programs, and through money from NMF, they helped fund this, because if it had to come out of my pocket, I wouldn't have that ability, just because, again, money is limited sometimes in this process, and you actually need money to make it through this process. However, despite me sending out my application to a lot of people, even the first time when I sent out my application, I got a lot of response back. I got a lot of interviews back. But this second time, now that I got these red flags on my mark, a lot of people was not feeling me. And so I only got 3 interview invites. I got 1 from an OBGYN position, and I got 2 from a family medicine position. Where did I match? Of course, it's a spoiler alert, because y'all know I'm doing OBGYN at Rush. And so, but despite my odds of applying to all of these different places, despite my odds of only being able to interview at 3 places, I matched into OBGYN. Those stats of me being where I am from where I was is not typical. So again, I am a person of faith, and so for me, it shows that there's something else beyond me that's helping me through this process, because I was able to match in the OBGYN program despite the odds against me. And so the odds were definitely in my favor. And in 2015, I matched into the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Rush. And then Dr. Pombar, who was my program director at that time, I felt like was an instrumental part in that despite the red flags that I came in my later half of my medical school career, he didn't let that define me. He knew that there were other things besides those failed tests that would make me, and that I was destined to do something more. And now here I am, 3 months away from finishing residency and becoming a board certified OBGYN. Couldn't, being born and raised from an underprivileged environment, couldn't count me out from being where I'm at today. Having a lack of mentor in medicine early in the process couldn't count me out from being where I am today. And a lot of times they say you need to see who you want to become. And even though I set out to become a doctor, that was not something that I saw in my community. But despite me not seeing that physically, I was able to become something that I didn't see in my community. Despite the lack of exposure to medicine, couldn't count me out from being at this spot that I am today. Despite me coming from an economically disadvantaged background, have failed board exams and all other things I've overcome, those things couldn't count me out from being where I'm at today. And now I have the ability to help change the face of medicine, help to create more diversity into the field, being an inspiration as well as a model for other people, that you don't have to have this squeaky clean background to get here, that sometimes your failures is what it actually makes you attractive to other people, because it helps set the tone of what your ability to overcome. And so I'm able to, work with like-minded peers. And then this is us at a breast cancer awareness walk with some other doctors that I'm aware of. And so definitely I'm at this point in my life for a reason. And then this was an article from my college that's just saying I went from being a first generation college student to an OBGYN. And so despite the obstacles that you face, there are other people that are watching you, and they are seeing what you have overcome, and they are using your story to help encourage other people. And next step for me, in the next 3 months after I finish my residency, I'm doing a global health fellowship in women's health with UCSF and the HEAL Initiative. And so I'm very excited to see where that takes me. As a 2-year fellowship in which I'll be doing underserved medicine at the Native American reservation in Arizona and New Mexico, and also working in Malawi, which is in Southeast Africa, and working on women health initiatives in that country. And then I just want to say happy Doctor's Day to all of the future doctors. I wish Doctor's Day is actually tomorrow. And so I just wish you the best during your medical journey. And thank you for taking this time to listen to this presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Dean. It was a wonderful presentation. So we have a couple minutes of questions and answers. So one question is, what is preliminary medicine, or that transitional medicine? Could you explain a little bit more about that? Preliminary medicine, you talked about prelim. What is that?
Yeah, so prelim, when you come into residency, it's a stepping stone to get you to something else. When you're applying to different residency programs, there's a way to do things categorical, which means you're in that specialty, and there's prelim. Some specialties require you to do a general year of something. And so, like for radiology, you have to do a general year of something. They don't care what you do, but when you match into radiology, you secured a radiology slot, but then you also need to figure out what you're going to do for that prelim. And so that prelims thing is going to help broaden your understanding for helping you do your actual specialty. Other ways to consider prelim is that it's a pre-thing to get you to where you wanted to. And so for me, my goal was to do OBGYN. But now that I realized I had these red flags on my resume, I knew somebody may not look at me and just like, oh yeah, we want her. So I may have to show myself through another way. And then after they see me showing myself in that, and I have, worked hard, show that I'm capable to do the job, then maybe they was like, oh, okay, now I'm going to, consider her for my OBGYN position. So sometimes people who are trying to do a surgical specialty, OBGYN or, some other things, they may do a surgery prelim just to show themselves worthy, and then hopefully that will give them enough confidence and enough exposure to help them go into the route of where they're trying to go. Wait, hold on. I'm not hearing you.
Sorry, I muted myself. So another person asks, they're interested in OBGYN, and how important is doing research during the summer after your first year of medical school?
So it's a hit or miss. Medical school residency is becoming more competitive. And one of the things to kind of help separate people in competitiveness is research. Now, some residency programs are more research heavy than others. So you need to have publications. You need to have done this for a decent amount of time. You need to show this merit in research. There are other programs where it's a good thing to have. You know, they want everyone to have some exposure because our understanding of how medicine advances is through the research of others. And so they want you to be able to do research because then you have an understanding of how to interpret research. But some programs are not as research heavy. And so those programs is great to have it. And you know, but do you need to have all of these scholarly works done? Maybe not so much. And so having an understanding of the institution that you're applying to will help understand how important is that research. In general, it has some importance, but and on some levels, depending on the institution, it would definitely be a deal breaker if they're considering you or not. If they're heavy research based and you're not that strong in research, then you probably don't fit that institution.
All right, thank you. I guess the last question of the night will be this question. What advice would you give others with the anxiety of having to finish on time in terms of applying to medical school, or even finishing your step 1, step 2s? If you could speak a little bit on that.
There's no thing. So there's a timeline for things. And one of the things I feel like that's good, regardless of what you're doing, is self-reflection. You learn from yourself when you reflect on how you're feeling about different things and what you have learned through the process and what you are doing through the process. And you have to have a sense of self-reflection because that's going to help tailor you what you do. We all need to push ourselves. We all need to strive to do well. But if you're pushing to yourself to anxiety and stress, are you really doing yourself a service? And so during my journey, I realized there's no linear way to do this. There are so many different pathways that can get you to the same destination, and your journey is going to look different than mine, and my journey definitely did look different than my peers. But guess what? All of us, we are all doctors at the end of the day, despite whatever journey that we have taken. And so you have to figure out, you have to self-reflect and make sure what do you really need to work on and be honest with yourself. But then you also have to realize that, sometimes if it takes you longer to do something, that's not a defeat. That's just understanding that your pathway to get to this process is just a little bit different.
Awesome. Thank you. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for taking your time, Dr. Dean, for your presentation and answering questions. Again, thank you to NMF, the National Medical Fellowships Organization, for connecting us so we could continue doing these types of events. Awesome. Thank you again for this opportunity. We really appreciate your time.
All right. Take care, everyone. And remember, happy National Doctors Day. You're going to make it. So you'll be one of my colleagues, someone I can refer to later on.
Awesome. Good night, everyone. Take care.